What do you read, my lord? Words, words, words. It's, of course, Polonius and Hamlet in Shakespeare's play, Hamlet. Today on the BetaFiles, we're going to be looking at a continuation of what Jay and I started talking about in the Optic Poet episode, the implosion of the universities. We're going to be looking at different English departments in universities across the nation and how they are committing themselves to the Black Lives Matter movement and critical race justice, social justice, through their diversity, and equality statements. So hang on to your diapers, babies. I'm the barber. This is the BetaFiles.
Play the BetaFiles podcast.
Here's the BetaFiles podcast.
Well, hello. How are you? So today we are going to be looking at, as I mentioned in the teaser, different English departments at different universities across the land, specifically two that are here in North Carolina, the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and then Appalachian State University. But we'll also look at a few others, and especially like Florida State University and a couple of others. Excuse me. I've been playing around with this for the past few days because earlier this week, Benjamin Boyce, who has the Boyce of Reason podcast, put a video up on YouTube where he had found the same letter that Jay and I referenced in the Optic Poet episode about the implosion of universities, from the University of Chicago, and that's how I actually found out about that particular document. And then after Jay and I did our podcast the next day, I got up and I thought, well, what other English departments have done this? And the first one I went to was, let's see what Chapel Hill's doing, because the university system here in North Carolina is basically run by Chapel Hill. That the University of North Carolina system comes out of Chapel Hill. So I thought, well, let's see what Chapel Hill's English department is doing, because it's a pretty substantial English department. It's supposedly ranked 15th in the nation, so that's pretty decent. So I went and looked, and sure enough, I found an even more interesting, I'll put it that way, and we'll take a look at it here in a minute, but a more interesting statement against or about diversity and equality and equity, and they throw these words around. They have specific meanings for them, and if you misidentify the meaning that they're attached to the word, they get kind of angry. For example, like racist, they have completely hijacked that term, as Jay and I talked about in another Optic Poet episode. But they've also hijacked diversity, they've hijacked equity and equality, and civil rights. They've kind of hijacked all of that and redefined them to fit their narrow, very narrow ideology in order to promote their politics. But then we'll talk about Appalachian State, which my undergrad was at Appalachian State, and I went there for creative writing and got into a playwriting module and did my hours in that. But I also worked for the University Writing Center as a student worker and got to see a lot of the inner workings of the department and the politics in the department. And then things changed. Of course, that was back in between 2001 and 2003 was when I was at Appalachian. So, yeah, and they have done some interesting stuff, and we're going to take a look at something that has really gotten under my skin, and I'm ashamed now that the department that I kind of got my footing in the English discipline in has pulled this, and they're going right along with everybody else, and they're actually Stanford is actually using Appalachian State's syllabus requirements as examples for their syllabi. Speaking of diversity and equality, and it's just a matter of time before we have and we're going to talk about that too. There's all kinds of syllabi examples of how to include diversity and equity in your syllabus and how to deal with it. And we're starting to see at Guilford Tech, we're starting to see small steps towards this very thing. I mentioned in other videos that I have been through the social justice, critical race theory style. I don't know what you would call it, seminars, work. I don't know. It's indoctrination. It's basically like, a sermon about microaggressions versus macroaggressions, minorities versus the majority, narrative, and all that stuff. I've been through a couple of those already. And they've been doing this slowly over the past few years at Guilford Tech. It's not been as in our face as other institutions. There are certain elements of critical race theory that make sense and are applicable and that are not dangerous, right? But the problem is that the majority white liberal class that is on the far left has taken this and run with it, right? I think it should be a red flag to everybody inside the movement and outside the movement that the number one book about racial dynamics and racial relationships is White Fragility, which is talking about how white people are all racist, and it's written by a middle-aged white woman, right? I give more credence to Ibram Kendi. Now, I disagree with a lot of what Kendi says. I disagree with a lot of what D'Angelo says, but I give more credence and more credibility to Kendi because he is a black man. And so he's writing from a place of experience. D'Angelo is hypothesizing. It's one of those things where D'Angelo made up her mind that the system was racist, and once she started digging, she found all that racism. And the problem with that, and I think I've mentioned this before in other podcasts, and a lot of other people have talked about this as well, if you determine ahead of time what the conclusion is going to be, then of course you're going to find it. If you determine that your partner is cheating on you and you convince yourself this is really happening, anything they do on the internet, on their cell phone, in any aspect of life, you will find elements of them cheating, of them being unfaithful, regardless of its credible, of its being factual or not. You will find that evidence because you have already determined that it's there. And it's the same. This is the same thing that the critical race theory movement is doing. It has predetermined beforehand that everything in Western culture is built on racist ideas, and so everything is racist, and you can find it everywhere, right? So you can take CRT, go back and watch the Cosby Show, and find racist elements in the Cosby Show. You can do it. You can find it in You can find it in Good Times. You can find it in A Different World or The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. All these groundbreaking African American centralized narratives through these sitcoms and through these wonderful TV shows that got us talking. They got the entire population, not just blacks, not just whites, the entire population talking. You can find racist elements in all. You can find racist elements in Blackish. In fact, one of the more interesting aspects of the show Blackish is playing with those tropes, right? But it's not done in a critical race theory model. They're playing with assumptions. They're playing with stereotypes, and they're breaking those stereotypes down. One of my one episode that comes to mind for me is this one episode where they're playing with this idea that all black people know each other. And of course, the whole episode is them playing with that stereotype. And then at the very end, the twist is two black men standing in the break room, and they're talking about who they talked to recently. And of course, they're all massively huge black celebrities, and they're talking about them like, they went and had a cup of coffee, or they had a phone call with them the other day. It's like it was just another person. And of course, that's the joke, right? That the stereotype is false, but then at the end, you see them, playing into that stereotype to have to put the punchline in place. So there's all kinds of different things like that. So we're already having these conversations that critical race theory is saying we're not having. And like I said, the red flag should be to everyone that the one person that is being talked about the most and the one book that's being talked about the most is a middle-aged white woman telling us that every white person is racist. I have credibility concerns with this very bit, regardless of her argument, and I am going to be doing a piece or a couple of pieces on white fragility, but regardless of her argument, that should be a major red flag that we've got a white middle-aged woman that is that's talking about this. Another thing that I noticed, Benjamin Boyce, going back to him, by the way, I'm going to have links to his video in the YouTube description and a link to his channel so you can check out his channel. You're going to hear me talk about him a lot because I love the guy. And Benjamin, if you see this video or you hear about this video, please reach out to me. I would love to have a really good conversation, even if it's just through correspondence. I'd love to have a great conversation with you. You're a very interesting young man. But he actually showed another video that I watched this morning. He put up, I think it was yesterday, where he showed a struggle session, where he found video of a struggle session. He sets it up and he explains what he's doing. And the point of his video is to show how critical race theory has already infiltrated dramatically the intellectual establishment. And he uses a struggle session from a psychology, I guess it was a psychology event, or it was all done on Zoom. I'm assuming it's Zoom, maybe it was Teams, or maybe it was Google, I don't know. But anyway, so he shows this video. And the key players in the video, you have a white, looks like an older 50s, 60s white male who's moderating. You have a younger, looks like he's in his late 20s or mid 30s, black male. You have a older, looks like she's in her 50s, 60s, black female. And then the other, I'm going to say 5 or 6 participants are white females. Okay? And most of them are middle-aged to 50s or 60s. Okay? So you're the range between 40 and 60, somewhere in there. And maybe a couple of them are actually in their mid-60s. But regardless, and what all of these white women are doing is, and now one of them pushes back a little bit and says, do we have to use, and this is the point of the video, or the clip that he shows, and he explains this later in the video, but there's this one woman who pushes back on the derogatory language, or the words, that the words are too harsh. Can we find other words to use so it's not so abrasive? And of course they come after her. And I think one of them accuses her, one of the other white women accuse her of hijacking the conversation. because she's directing attention to herself. And all she's doing is asking a question. Do we have to use this abrasive language? Can we find other language? Is there other ways to get this message across? And she's trying really hard to enter this information or enter this question into the conversation in a way that's not quote unquote offensive to the others. And of course they jump all over her like sharks. They can smell the blood. And then they show several other white women, a couple of which are on the verge of tears. You can hear their voices start to break up because of all the guilt of being a white supremacist in this white supremacist culture. So, check out Ben. Like I said, I'm going to have links to those two videos, to the one about the University of Chicago, and of course that one with the struggle session. And check it, and then check out the rest of it. He has a 22 video series on what happened at Evergreen State College. And it's the complete story of the whole Brett Weinstein triggered events at Evergreen State College. So check it out. Definitely check it out. It's a very good thing. All right. So let's talk about English departments. So as you notice, I've got... Whoa, what happened here? I'm sorry, I got the wrong window. There we go. All right. Sorry. Probably like, what is going on? Okay, I got it all set up. So anyway, I'm playing with a few things with branding and that kind of thing as we get ready to move the Substack. I've actually got an update about the Substack thing at the very end of this video. So, but let's talk about. We'll start with the Chicago University of Chicago piece that both Benjamin Boyce talks about, and of course what me and Jay talked about in the Optic Poet for this week, which is titled the one about university implosion or whatever. And this is the actual statement that we read here. So this gives you an idea of what we're talking about. All right. So then we go to this University of Washington Department of English. They have their commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion. This one's not as articulate as University of Chicago. They do have this list of strategies that they have, such as to stage serious, capacious conversations. Okay, so let me go ahead and say this one thing, because I'm sure some of you are like, what the hell is going on with this guy? And I actually texted Jason about this morning, because I was like, I woke up this morning and it was cloudy with a chance of an existential crisis. Yes, I am an honest-to-God associate professor of English, okay? I have a very limited vocabulary. I have always had a limited vocabulary. And I have engorged on books since my teenage years, okay? As a child, I didn't like to read that much, but as I got older, into my adolescence, and then, of course, to my young adult years, I started reading more and more. I started just engorging on novels and different kinds of books and stuff. So I said that to explain that during my development, during my cognitive development as a child, I limited myself to what vocabulary or means of producing vocabulary I would actually engage in. And so by the time I finally did get into actually reading a lot of really cool books, I didn't have the mindset to actually retain that information. So, and when I was explaining to Jason earlier this morning, I was actually complaining about all the different literary techniques and literary theories and that kind of thing. And I said, I know it when I see it. When I see it, I get it. But I have a hard time as an individual articulating what I'm seeing. And so it gets to the point where, and that may be some kind of learning disability. I don't know. Me personally, I think learning disabilities, are there actual learning disabilities? Yes, I think there are, but I don't think it's what we make them out to be. It's like, oh, that person's just stupid, they can't learn this. No, they don't. Something in their brain does not allow them to conform to that structure. But if you found a different structure, they'd be able to actually engage with that particular thing. For me, it's retaining nuanced ideas. Again, I can see, I know the broader ideas, I get the broader ideas, no problem, but the nuances of those problems, and because of that, nuances of those problems I don't really retain, but because of that, my vocabulary is very limited. And so when I see words that I don't typically deal with on a daily basis, yeah, I'm going to mispronounce them. I'm going to stumble all over them. Why is that? Because I'm a fucking human being. Okay? So, now I've said all that. Trust me when I tell you, I am an associate professor of English. I swear to God. If you go to Guilford Tech's website and you look me up, you'll find me in the directory. I am there. And I don't know if I'm in the A&T directory, but you can. I think I am actually. You can find me in the adjuncts. But my students, as far as my teaching abilities, over the past 10 years, my students are always some of the best writers that go into the other classes. So I'm doing something right. You know, I may not be using all the right terminology that, the theorists in composition studies would want me to use, but they're getting the concepts and they're figuring it out. And so I do have that. All right. So I do have that pride. All right. So anyway, so let's go back to this and try and read this again. So again, this is the English Department of Washington University, or University of Washington. Stage serious, capacious conversations that articulate how a commitment to countering ongoing legacies of systemic inequity transforms our discipline in intellectual and pedagogical contexts. These conversations should include mandatory workshops and other events. Within these conversations, it is essential that we are self-reflective about the historical and epistemological presumptions about the discipline. So let me break this down for you, just this first one. Okay? What they're saying is they want to have conversations that articulate, quote, how a commitment to countering ongoing legacies of systemic inequity transforms our discipline in intellectual and pedagogical contexts. In other words, they want to have these what would have become known as struggle sessions. This is not conversations. A conversation is where one person offers information, the other person offers information, and then the two of them talk about the two sets of information that is set there, and maybe a third outside party block of information that's brought in by the two participants. That's a conversation, okay? What they're talking about is not a conversation. They're talking about a dictation. We're going to tell you, okay, how did you feel about this particular thing? Okay, well, why don't you take that idea and start applying it to your class and do it in this lens, okay? Sounds harmful at the surface, but the problem is that the only lens they're going to allow any English instructor to have is one of critical race theory. And the reason why I know that is because that's what it was 10 years ago when I was in graduate school. So it hasn't changed. The difference now is they're being bolder. They're letting the public see a little bit more behind the curtain. Build capacity to listen to and work with each other across differences, communities, through collaborations, across programs, sharing committee work across areas, and supporting consulting with programs and groups that are doing active and innovative work in using research, teaching, and service to counter ongoing legacies of systemic inequity. So they had me on board until that last bit. Service to counter ongoing legacies of systemic inequity. Ongoing legacies. Legacies that haven't really been a part of the university system for at least 30 years. Because the minute this started, back in the 90s, they started purging these quote-unquote legacies. And again, I know. I've been in education for 10 years now. Higher education. Okay? I know. These legacies that they're complaining about, most of them do not exist, and the ones that do exist anymore don't exist anymore, and the ones that do exist anymore, over the past 5-10 years, have been addressed, and the university systems have been constantly, year after year, working on improving those. So to say that we're going to start addressing these inequities now, we've been addressing them for at least a decade, probably longer. Like I said, this started in the 90s. So, whatever. Develop a speaker series on issues of diversity. Now, this may be a little conspiracy theory minded on my part, but it sounds like to me it's develop indoctrination, right? Develop a speaker series on issues of diversity. Bring people in to indoctrinate. I'm not going to go through all of this, but you get the idea. Okay, so there's one. Let's go to Kansas University. Statement on diversity. Kansas University, or University of Kansas, Department of English. Historically, this is the paragraph I wanted to talk about. Here we go. Historically, we found our commitment to diversity to be a compass that enabled us to navigate through uncertain times. Good. But I'm getting the feeling that you're not going to do that anymore. This guidance results in a variety of courses we have offered. Good. Expanding course offerings is awesome. And the more courses you devote towards studying and understanding prejudice and how the system works against specific groups, kudos. Good for you. We need that. Education needs that. Okay? Not only have they been rooted in traditional approaches, but in innovative ones too, as shifting times offer new theories and methods. So they're recognizing that this is the first one, well, we're only 3 in, but this is the first one that recognizes that, hey, society changes and we need to change with it. We have been quite strategic in diversifying our faculty hires, attracting the best and brightest new talent to enter the profession, as well as seasoned veterans. These have been augmented by welcoming distinguished visiting professors, lecturers, and readers. The Langston Hughes Visiting Professorship, instituted in 1977, was enabled to attract distinguished scholars, several of whom became full-time faculty. Named after Hughes? I'm good with it. We have also increased our graduate student diversity by launching a sneak peek recruitment initiative to bring prospective students from underrepresented groups to campus. Good. That's called marketing. Why weren't you doing that before? And since 1998, the department has been home to the Project on the History of Black Writing, an important program that covers and preserves creative and critical work by formerly renowned and lesser-known artists and writers. Awesome. Kudos to you. Now that we know your bona fides, let's find out where you're lacking. To remain fresh in our thinking and alert to the need for change, we constantly undergo forms of self-study. We recently conducted, for example, a department-wide climate survey, safe zone training, and an inclusivity workshop. Knowing that fresh ideas and approaches are not the exclusive province of the English department, We actively engage colleagues in interdisciplinary work in such departments as women, gender and sexuality studies, theater, indigenous studies, African and African American studies, Latin American and Caribbean studies, and American studies, as well as programs in disability studies, the anti-human trafficking network, and colonialism. The way forward has seldom been linear, but generally circuitous. I guess they're saying circular. Why can't you just say circular? Through fits and starts. But forward has been the trajectory. Over the years, when the principles of civility and mutual respect suffered from discourses rooted in divisiveness, intolerance, and discord, our department found stability and safe space in our pursuit of diversity. We seek that which is best in all of us, not the worst, for in seeking the best, we rediscover and remind ourselves of the redeeming values that connect us. And that looks like that is the end of their statement. They haven't really said anything. They've used a couple of buzzwords, but this particular paragraph, though, I want to go back to because it's great. It's great. Because what we have here is them telling Black Lives Matter, hey, we have some street cred. We got some cred here. We helped. We named something after Langston Hughes. And I know that this is very cynical of me, I know. And since 1998, we've been home to the Project of the History of Black Writing, which gives notice to lesser-known artists and writers. Oh, excuse me. Notice, though, that when they talk about these faculty hires and they talk about the visiting professorship, they don't give us any numbers on what what color these people are. Notice that? Just saying. All right, let's go on to the next one. University of Maryland. Let's see here. More IDA. Department of English. Further development of diversity inclusion website content resources. Revise the English Department Plan of Organization with focus on IDEA as integral to the process of shared governance, committee membership, and enfranchisement. Practice holistic admissions for all graduate programs. Periodically revise IDEA best practices guide outlining how each program promotes IDEA. These guides concretize. These guys concretize practices around duties, policies. This is why scholars piss me off. These guides concretize practices around duties, policies, and timelines that impact curriculum, hiring, purchasing, resource allocation, event planning, and outreach to ensure that they are intentional and carried over as administrative positions change. And then they have required departmental diversity inclusion statement. By the way, their diversity statement is short and to the point. That they're going to help minorities. And that's about it, right? So they don't buy into the critical race theory mess as much. Or they're not showing it. Put it that way. So right here, the principles of inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility drive the Department of English instructional missions, shape our learning environments and workplace culture, and inform our research endeavors. Okay. So what does that mean? That means what they're doing is with the University of Maryland, what they're doing is they're being as generic and open-ended as possible with their particular statement. Here we have Indiana University at Bloomington. Statement of Anti-Racist Solidarity. Department of English at Indiana University, Bloomington expresses our solidarity with the family and communities of George Floyd. His killing follows those of these young people, we mourn their deaths. We affirm that Black Lives Matter. We speak out in support of black communities in the current crisis and always. That's fine. I don't have any problems with any departments doing that because we do have a problem. In fact, we have several problems. But my issue is how they're trying to fix these problems. They're going about it the wrong way. Michigan Department of English commits all of its members, as scholars, writers, teachers, and members of various communities, to an unwavering affirmation of diversity, a staunch desire to foster a sense of belonging, especially for people who have been marginalized historically and continue to be. Justice exists only if it exists for all people, and that is true. Thus, we condemn racism against black people. At this point, who hasn't? At this point, what institution actually promotes racism against black people? I think everybody has condemned racism again. The government has condemned it. We have laws. So I think that's a unnecessary statement. We condemn all racism against all groups and persons and absolutely oppose the many kinds of violence done to people of color, to all oppressed groups in America and around the world. These are statements that are duh. Yes, who is for this? And before you say, well, white supremacists. Yeah, white supremacists. Again, such a small minority. Such a small group of people. Very small compared to the rest of the population that does not share their ideas. And before you say, well, Trump voters, no. Trump voters voted for Trump. Matt Taibbi put it best. They voted for Trump to blow up the system because they were pissed. And they're still pissed. We're 4 years into this, and nobody except Trump gets the fact that they're still pissed. They're still angry. The system has not done anything. It has not done anything for them. So are Trump supporters racist? No. Are they white supremacists? Are there white supremacists that are Trump supporters? Yes. Are all of the Trump supporters white supremacists? No. By a long shot. They are not. I mean, the amount of people who are Trump supporters who are not white supremacists is ungodly huge. Okay? That's the majority of his base. They are middle class, working people, regardless of their race or color. They're just working middle class people. And they're pissed at the system. And as Taibbi said, the majority of people that he met in 2016 that were voting for Trump just wanted to blow up the system. They figure he'll get in there and destroy it all. That was the point. Not in a revolutionary kind of way, but he would just get in there and cause so much chaos that the system would collapse. And we could start over. We could build again, right? Unlike critical race theory, which wants to tear everything down and resegregate. Basically trying to punish the majority for being the majority. We had nothing to do with being the majority. Just like they had nothing to do with becoming the minority. I'm talking about the current generation. Not a single white person who's alive today came over in a boat in 1492. Not a single black person alive today in America came over on a boat in 1619. Did our ancestors? Yes. Did we? No. We condemn, already read that. We demonstrate our commitments to anti-racism in our work as teachers of African American, Latinx. When did we come up with Latinx? Somebody tell me this because I don't get it. What's wrong with Hispanic? Can somebody explain that one to me? Why we're not using Hispanic anymore and we're using Latinx? By the way, how is that offensive? Latino or Latina? Somebody explain that one to me. I don't get it. I'm not understanding the way that they're changing the words and the way they're changing the vocabulary. It doesn't make sense to me. Asian American literature of critical race, post-colonial feminist queer theories of rhetoric and writing in various modes, from poems to stories to essays. We teach, write, speak, and act in the service of expanding equity, access, cooperation. We believe the study of the past oppression can bolster. Let's go back to. So let's do this one. We teach, write, speak, and act in the service of expanding equity across. Equity, access, cooperation. I'm sorry, I'm like trying to read and highlight at the same time. We believe the study of past oppression can bolster resistance to contemporary injustice, that the most suitable art can speak the most profound truths to power, and that, as W.E.B. Du Bois reminded us, criticism is the soul of democracy. Study of past oppression can bolster resistance to contemporary injustice. In this one statement, they're saying the value of literature is being able to go back and look at past experiences, historical past experiences, whether through fiction or nonfiction or poetry, can actually help the present. Yes! Yes! That is literature. That's the point of literary studies. Okay? And then we got this. We express these commitments with humility because we recognize that as members of the Indiana University community, we are complicit in a power structure that privileges whiteness. We know how challenging it will prove to eradicate racism from American life, but we accept that challenge. Well, okay. Our dedication as a department to the study of language in its most public forms invites us to speak, as does the commitment expressed in our diversity statement to develop an inclusive academic culture in which diversity is not the responsibility of a few or celebrated only at isolated events, but the coordinated, shared, and collective responsibility of the entire departmental community, including faculty at all ranks, staff, graduate students, and undergraduate students. But diversity does not equal recognizing the majority. A power structure that privileges whiteness. I'm going to say this so many times. We are 60% of the population of this country. Blacks are 13.4%. When we look at systemic structures, a lot of these structures that they're complaining about, and a lot of the problems with those structures that they point out, is not about racism. It's about marketing and capitalism. Here's the example. Here's the example for you. So let's say you've got a TV show. Okay, you've got a TV network. And your highest rated programs are ones with all white casts. And your lowest rated programs are programs that have either all minority casts or a mixture of minority and white casts. Those are the lowest rated. Which one are you going to invest in? Are you going to invest in the other, in the lower rated, the one nobody's watching? Or are you going to invest in the one that they're tuning in to watch all the time? And why are they tuning in to watch? Is it because they're racist and they don't like watching things with Latinx characters or black characters? Or are they tuning in to watch because they look like us? the characters in the show look like us. The majority is always going to rule when it comes to capitalism and marketing. They're only going to market to who is buying their stuff. And if white people are the largest contingency in this country and we're buying the most stuff, guess who they're going to advertise to? They're going to advertise to us. If we're the ones watching the most television sets, they're going to build the television sets for us, and they're going to build the television programs for us. This is not that difficult, and it's not racism. It's marketing. It's just simple business. You do not build your entire brand if you're trying to make, let's look at again, television, right? You're not going to, after decades and decades and decades of catering to this audience, you're not going to shift gears all of a sudden and cater to a completely different audience and expect to make more money. Because it's not going to happen. We've seen over and over and over and over the past 30, 40 years where networks have tried and failed. And then we have these quote unquote sleeper hits. And the sleeper hits are usually talking to the larger audience, and the larger audience tunes in to watch it. Again, I point out Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson has the highest rated show on cable news right now. The highest rate in the history of cable news. Why? Because he's speaking to the larger audience. Are they all xenophobic racists? No! They're just common people. And he's speaking to the common person. So what are advertisers going to do? You stop buying Colgate toothpaste because they're on Tucker Carlson? And Colgate says, oh, well, we've been canceled by this very small minority. We need to pull our product. What happens when they pull their product? Within a couple months, they're right back. And in the meantime, after they pull their product, another product steps in and says, we want some of this publicity. Because the more you cancel him, the more they're going to tune in. Dumbasses. That's marketing. All right. So I'm running out of time. So I want to get to Carolina and Appalachian. So this is UNC, but as you can see, I've got Yale, Berkeley. Well, okay, I do want to show the Arkansas thing. This makes me laugh. All right, so first of all, it's University of Arkansas. Okay. Statement in solidarity with protests, and they have several different articles here. I'm not going to open it up. But basically, we're reaching out to you in pain and solidarity in these days of uprising against our nation's fundamental structural injustices, long-standing and deep-rooted injustice, most recently exposed by murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDaniel, and others. Our university, like so many, has long participated in maintaining those structures, as our administrators have acknowledged. We must all work together and stand up for one another if we are to help bring change. And then, of course, like I said, they've got the three little things here. But then they have this series of pictures, and I swear to God, I saw this and I was like, oh, guys, come on. Pick some different pictures, right? So we'll start at the beginning. We're going to go all the way to the beginning. All right, so this first picture, for those of you who are listening, this first picture has a round table, and it looks like some kind of workshop maybe, or some kind of meeting where they're going over some notes or whatever. But I see 1, 2, 3, 4 white women, 1, 2 white males. 5 white women and 2 white males. Next picture. Older professor. Got Allman Brothers going on back behind him. That's cool. All right, so I see 1, 2, 3, 4 students right here, or right in the right-hand side of the picture, are obviously white. And then we have an ethnic person of some kind. I can't tell, but just based on what we see, and maybe she's white too. She just looks ethnic from behind. I don't know, but at least 5 white people in that picture. 1, 2, 3, 4 white people, 1 Asian in that picture. Here's a picture of a young lady or a professor giving a lecture. Of the students that we can see, it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and I think maybe 10 white students in this picture. No, that I can tell, it doesn't look like there are any ethnic or minority students in that classroom. Next picture, we've got a teacher. It looks like another workshop style class. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people in the picture. Of the 5 people, 3 of them are obviously white. Then we've got this young lady at the front. I can't tell if she is white or if she's got some kind of Native American ethnicity. And then we have the teacher, who looks like she is Middle Eastern maybe, or South Asian. Next picture, we have a white woman, white professor again, standing in front of a classroom. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 students looking at her. Of the 6 students, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At least 5 that I can tell are white. And then we have a row of people. I'm assuming these are professors, maybe. We've got 2 males, white males, in the picture. The other 4 people in the picture are white females. Another picture of a classroom. An old bald white guy in front of what looks like 4 white male students. Now this one, I take that back. At least 2 of them I can confirm are white. The other 2, I don't know. I have to see them. I'm just looking at their profiles. Okay. And finally, what looks like another workshop of some kind, writing workshop. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 visible female students and the teacher. 7 female students and the teacher. Only 1 looks like she is not white. So you go through this row of pictures, and on the University of Arkansas English department solidarity page, and how they're like, "Oh, we're with Black Lives Matter. We're totally against the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. Look, we're mostly white." Now, the only thing I can fault the University of Arkansas is that they didn't think about these pictures. That maybe they should have chosen different pictures. But at the same time, this kind of goes along with arguments that I've had in the past, where this University of Arkansas, okay? Now, I haven't looked at the Arkansas numbers, but I'm willing to bet the state of Arkansas, their largest population is white. So when you have the University of Arkansas, the state-supported school, it's probably going to be majority white. And I think that that series of pictures shows we have a majority white population. All right. So let's look at the Chapel Hill English Department statement. We're going to go to the part that really bothered me the most when I was reading it yesterday. Here we go. A review of our pedagogies, curricula, and coursework aimed at uprooting any remnants of white supremacy and identifying implicit and unconscious racial bias wherever they persist. So in other words, they're going to look at what they've been teaching and getting rid of quote-unquote white supremacist ideals. This bothers me a little bit. I'm going to come back to why. A call for advanced institutional support through a broad array of innovative, peer-reviewed research and cutting-edge methodologies in anti-bias training and education for our students. In other words, they're saying we're going to use peer-reviewed evidence, but it's only peer-reviewed evidence that supports anti-bias training and anti-racism, critical race theory, okay? Which is problematic because you're not bringing in peer-reviewed information from other sources that are against it and kind of weighing the difference and weighing, what are the positives, negatives, what are the what's the credibility on this side versus credibility on that side, what are they doing with the numbers versus what they're doing to the numbers, etc. No, you're focusing on one side and that's it. And you're only going to regurgitate the peer review of that side. And this is the problem that Sokol Squared tried to point out, or the grievance study affair, right? That Lindsay and Bogosian and oh God, the lady, I can't remember her name. The British lady. Anyway, this is what they were pointing out, that if it doesn't align with the politics of this freaking madness, then they dismiss it. But if it aligns with it, they eat it, and they'll take anything, right? Instructional staff at all ranks, graduate admissions committees, search committees, tenure committees, and post-tenure review committees aimed at identifying the insidious remains of white supremacy. So, in other words, all of the entrance, all of the means to entrance into the graduate program at in the English department at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill is going to be reviewed, and there's going to be a gate. And if you are not diverse enough and you're not spouting the ideology back in a way that is permissible, or in a way that is recognized as their understanding of the ideology, based on peer-reviewed evidence. So they're going to be using peer-reviewed evidence to establish these things. Then you're not going to get in. And for the ones who have gotten in, we're going to be going back. And we're going to be examining you. This is dangerous shit. Because now the ideology has taken control. All right, so lastly, where is there any way? Appalachian. Here we go. Appalachian State. Statement on diversity looks pretty standard. Everything that they're saying in this, I agree with a whole 100%. This is where I have problems with my alma mater. September 8th, 2020, English Department approved the following resolution proposed by the Anti-Racism Working Group. PDF of the resolution is available here. Resolution. Whereas the word nigger, N-word, from this point conjures a blood-soaked history of the Middle Passage, slavery, the Ku Klux Klan, lynchings, coerced sterilization, Jim Crow, the abuse of the 13th Amendment to create a racially biased criminal justice system, and mass incarceration, redlining, segregation, racial massacres in Tulsa, Rosewood, and Wilmington, and more violence against black bodies in the United States than there is room to list here. Okay, so all of the injustices ever committed towards black people is encapsulated in one word. That is what they're arguing. Resulting history is one in which the N-word has been weaponized as a tool for systemic racism, terror, and hatred, leaving in its wake collective trauma and internalized oppression for African Americans, which is what we just talked about. The N-word is inextricably linked to the history of the United States, and as such, appears in literature, film, and other cultural artifacts. For that reason, we must continue to engage with it responsibly. Good, as you should. Because it's there, and you have to you have to understand why it's there. We're going to come to that in just a minute. The act of uttering the N-word aloud in our classrooms may be interpreted as insurmountable hate speech that becomes an impediment to civil discourse, productive intellectual inquiry, and a safe learning environment. All right, number one, if you are reading a book with students and you read that word aloud in the context of the literature, then you shouldn't be offended. If you explain to them what the context is, you should not be offended. Because the word is doing something in that text. If you have instructors who walk into their room and are just dropping N-bombs everywhere, you need to fire their asses. If you have students that are getting offended because Huckleberry Finn uses the N-word throughout the book, Huck Finn, then they don't need to be taking a lit class because they're missing the point. Great teachers emphasize what the language is doing, not using the words as targets or as weapons. A great lit teacher will not weaponize a word. What they'll do is they'll take that word and they will explain how it can be weaponized and how the context of the literature that word is surrounding is manipulating and using that word. If your instructors can't handle that word and teach the context around the word and how the word is being used, you need to fire them. And if you have students who cannot sit in a literary class with the understanding that we're going to study literature, which is made up of words, then they don't need to be in that class because they're not going to learn from that class. At some point, we have to use our fucking brains and use common sense. The whole reason why I started this entire thing with the quote from Hamlet. The very next passage, right after that, Hamlet uses the construction of words to talk shit to Polonius's face, and Polonius doesn't realize it. And it's this really cool rhetorical trick that Hamlet is using, which actually adds to the dimension of his character. Now, if you looked at that piece now through critical race theory, you would say he's being ageist. Because of what he's doing to Polonius and the actual content of the next set of lines. But there's actually, what's really happening is that Shakespeare is playing with the idea of how words are constructed and how the context of those words matter. Because he's not being an ageist. He just hates Polonius. He thinks Polonius is an idiot. And Polonius' responses prove what Hamlet thinks. That's understanding literature. If you're an instructor and you're uncomfortable with reading reading pieces of literature out loud with the N-word, then don't do it. But you still have to talk about it. Because the authors are using it for a reason, and when you build the context, when you understand the context and you show them the context, all of a sudden they understand why that word is happening. Okay? If you're comfortable, like I am, as you read a passage and you come across that word, you keep going and you explain what's going on with that whole passage. Not once have I had a student get angry with me and storm out of my classrooms or pull me up on Title IX charges or any kind of charges because I said the N-word as I was reading a passage that had the N-word in it. Because I build the context and frame it for them so they understand what that word is doing. That's what you're supposed to do as a teacher. The minute you start doing things like this, the minute you start policing the language of the instructors, is the minute you're taking not only the experience away from the students, but you are now creating a less nuanced understanding, a less impactful understanding of what literary studies is supposed to be. Period. It starts with the N-word. It will end up with he, she pronouns. So there we go. This one was kind of angry. I'm sorry. I don't like what they're doing to my field. I don't like what they're doing to English at the universities. So there you go. I'll have all of these posted as links in the YouTube description, all the ones that I had open. There were a few that we didn't go over. But I'll have all of them linked there. You can go back and watch it. I did this because people need to know what the universities are doing. And when we talked about the implosion of the university the other day on the Optic Poet, this is another step in the direction of that destruction. The minute you start regulating what's happening at the universities and putting these ideological barriers in, is the minute the universities become irrelevant. And the whole system will collapse. James Lindsay said that he thinks that the only way out of this is if STEM steps up and pushes back and fights to bring it back, like we saw in the 90s with the science wars. I hope he's right. And I hope STEM wakes up, because one of the other things we talked about in the Optic Poet was, if STEM doesn't do something, this is going to get so out of hand that STEM will walk away and go into the private sector. And we will lose true innovation then. Because innovation comes when it's accessible to the public. It's got to be accessible to the public. So maybe the public does. On the flip side of that, maybe it's time that we take that away from the public, because we haven't actually used it that well. If we look at Silicon Valley, that's the product of that public innovation. And it's not a happy thing. Anyway, this was a dark one. I'm sorry. Anyway, sorry, not sorry. Check out Benjamin Boyce, his channel. It's a great channel. Also, check out another channel called Unsafe Space. They're really good. They do some really good stuff. But like I said, I'll have all kinds of links in the description for all that. Really quick update on the Substack thing. Originally, I was trying to launch it the 1st of October. I don't think that's going to happen. Same thing with Now See This Here Now Then. I'm moving Richard Cranium back to November. To be honest with you, I just have not had time to write this stuff, because my job is demanding so much of me right now because of the COVID stuff. So it's so I'm pushing stuff out again. And really, to be honest with you, let's just do this. We're going Substack on January 1st. All right, so that gives me between now and January 1st to get everything together the way I want it to be. So I don't want to rush it if I haven't had time to actually do what I want. So we're going to, you hear it here first. Substack is going to happen on January 1st. Okay. That way, again, I've got plenty of time to build stuff. Plus, it's a good start. January 1st, new year, new platform. All right. And I'm thinking about moving the videos to Vimeo because, you know, when you're averaging 7 to 10 views in a video, it doesn't really matter what platform you're on at that point. So I'm thinking about moving it to Vimeo. I'll let you know in the future, okay, if that's what I end up doing. So Substack is not happening in October. It's being moved to January 1st, and Richard Cranium's coming back in November, not October, because I haven't had a chance to, again, just write it. You got to write it, right? So anyway, all right, so there you go. Make it a great day. Be safe. Be healthy. And remember, if there's opportunity, remember that as long as the sun comes up, there's opportunity. So make sure you take it. I'm the barber. This has been the BetaFiles.